Hey. All right. I'm usually loud enough without a microphone, but I'm going to do the microphone just so that back row can hear me. So welcome, everybody. Yeah, I know it's after lunch. I have I always pick those ones where like people start kind of dwindling and like the person next to you is in charge of elbowing you in the ribs. All right, I give you permission. All right, and I am a walker arounder. So when I talk, our poor cameraman has already asked me. So I said the only thing I don't do is dance. So if you do fall asleep and you start snoring, you will find me right next to you going, and then you might end up on camera. All right, just so that you know. All right, so I didn't pick up the other gizmo that I need. Hold on. Here we go. Perfect. Okay. So this is me. If you want to find out more about me, there's this cute, cool thing online. If you want to have like a caricature done of yourself, and you can ask them to trim down the cheeks and the triple chins and all that kind of stuff. They kind of do magic. It's kind of cool. So I've had a couple done over the years. All right. So the first thing that I wanted to do was to, not everybody has been exposed to PMOs or project management office. We're going to talk about naming convention in a minute in the same way. So I just want to show of hands who in their organization as something that you would call a project management or program management office or project support group, anything of that sort. Oh, not too bad. Pretty much a good segment, all right, of people, which is great. So my session today, what we're going to do is, the title is Variations on the PMO, and for the rightly so, because you talk about these things with different people, and everyone will give you a different definition, a different perspective. In their offices, some of them do certain things, and somebody else in their offices, it does certain other things. The ones that I love the most are those organizations when you go in, what do you mean we're supposed to only have one? The biggest one I came across, I did a presentation recently, and one lady said, we have 23. And I went, oh my God, good luck. It's nice. I don't do consulting anymore. So anyways, so we're going to talk about some of that stuff. So we're going to first start up with what is a PMO, kind of bring it down to some of the basics. Then I want to spend most of the talk actually talking about structures, functions, and then how does maturity, and what does maturity do to PMOs, and how should it play a role? And now sometimes it doesn't, because we want to start out way too fast, way at the higher level, when we need to kind of work our way through it, type of thing. And then I'm going to give you a couple of guidelines for implementations, which are also guidelines for rehabilitation, if you need to, so that kind of you get a starting point. All right, and I like to make people work a little bit. It's just the way that I am, but I've given you tools. So you have two sheets. So one sheet is literally, I love to give people a takeaway. That's the one thing I always go to, like seminars and conventions and stuff, and they always say, like you'll get the PDF or whatever, and then I never look back at those PDFs. But I found out years ago that if I was to give a person a one-page takeaway, then that often ends up on the wall in the office or somewhere, and that's something that's much more useful. So what I've done is I've given you like a takeaway one. Thank you for doing the color printing. I didn't ask for color, but this one looks really good in color. Oh yeah, you can get one more. Hold on. I've got them all over. Which ones do you need? The diagram? Okay. There, I got a pile.
Awesome.
I got a pile.
Sweet. Cool.
All right. So, and if you don't, let me know. There's people can kind of pass some along that way. So that's the takeaway one. All right. In the back of that one, I love lists. Who doesn't love a list? Right? And I was sitting there before and I heard this gentleman with the beard over there. Oh, I love lists. Yes. So I've given you the list to all end list, which is 40 reasons why PMO failed. Ari Hall is one of my favorite risk person, but a couple of years ago he came up with this list, and I asked him, I said, can I just like use this, because this is too, some of those are really funny, but most of them are actually truthfully real. So you've got a list at the back and a diagram at the front. So that's your kind of takeaway. The first place that I want you to start with is the second page. So on the front of it, you'll have the little box with the thinking box, right? And there's those 3 questions on there. So what I want you to do, and you can do it for yourself or you can talk with some of the people around you, I want you to first kind of figure out, do you have something that you call, and there's quite a bit of hands that went up. So do you have something that you call some kind of structure, a PMO or a PSO or something in your organization? What do you call it? That's the second thing. I might call it a PMO, but what do you call it in your organization? Okay? And do you think that the role of that unit plays an essential role in your organization? So is it, that to me, an essential role would be is this where people go to when they want to find out something about project management in your organization? And that's what PMOs are supposed to be about. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to talk about this. And I don't know if I need to sing for the camera or whatever while we're doing this, but I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to talk about this. And then what I'll do is I'll pick on a couple of people. So be ready, because I'm going to pounce. Look at you all talking to one another. Love that. Okay, so I'm going to bring you back in. So I gave you permission to talk. No, I take the permission away. All right. Okay, so apparently this is a topic that a lot of people have stuff to say about. So who wants to kind of get started? I'm gonna assume that if you're answering the question, you do have a PMO, so we'll leave that one. What I want to hear are some of the naming conventions that are being used out there, like formally in your organization, not informally what you call that thing, because let's not be rude, all right? Because sometimes people have really bad name for PMOs, so we're going to leave those alone. But formally, I was to walk into your organization and want to go to the PMO office, what would I call it? So who wants to take a stab? Yeah.
So in our organization, we're considered an IT PMO. So we're not enterprise, we're not organization-wide. We're sort of a smaller group, but we're the IT project management office.
IT project management office. Okay, IT PMO. Yes?
Yeah, in my previous organization where I worked, so it was called as a program management office. So that organization was very big, and some of the projects we were handling, they were like even $1 million projects.
Okay.
The budget was so high, and because we were getting so much business, so many projects, so we had to categorize those projects under some portfolios, and those portfolios were being handled and managed by the program manager. So
okay.
The structure of the PMO office was that in one PMO department there was one program manager, and under the one program manager we had multiple project managers.
Project manager. Yeah. Most kind of program offices kind of work like that. But did that program office also do kind of portfolio management duties?
Exactly. So the program manager was responsible for managing one portfolio.
Portfolios as well.
Under one portfolio we had multiple projects.
Okay.
Especially the projects which were similar in terms of the business side.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. But you had one group, right?
Yeah.
Not multiple groups, but different portfolios in that group. Okay. So the comment was, in his organization, they called it a program management office. And basically the structure of it was they had the one office, and then they add the program manager with different portfolios that were related to different business units, basically, as opposed to have different PMOs in different business units, which sometimes happens a lot. All right, there was another end, yep.
So our group is called the Transformation Services Branch.
Transformation Services Branch, TSB.
TSB.
All right.
And within that, we have kind of 3 units that work together. So we have the Project Planning and Support Services team.
Project Planning and Support Services team.
Yeah, that's right. And then we have a Continuous Quality Improvement group. That
Continuous Quality Improvement Group.
like performance metrics type
Yep.
thing. And then we have an engagement group that does like user input.
Engagement Group. Those are all under that TSB banner. Okay. Anybody who's got another name?
2 ministries I used to work at have a process improvement office.
Process Improvement Office.
Used to be a PMO, and another one has a change management office. I think that's what they call it. Both very successful.
All right. So change management
And a
office.
process improvement office.
Okay. Anybody else has got other naming conventions? Oops.
In our organization, we call them that office IT source.
IT source. Okay. The source of all things IT. Okay. And then I had another end over there.
So we used to have a project management office, but they changed the convention to a project and shut down.
A project, sorry?
Project and shut down.
And shut down?
And shutdown group? Project and shutdown group. Okay.
They work for a mining company, so
Okay. All right. Thank you. At least they didn't call it a project and termination group.
instead of 15 years, we do a plant maintenance shutdown.
Okay. All right. Shutdown group. Okay. Well, this is a new. I'm gonna have to write that one down. That was a new one to me. All right. So basically, there's all kinds of naming convention, and there's not one that's better than the other. The only thing is when we start looking at structure and functions and maturity level, that's where I want you to see some of the differences and how sometimes the naming convention actually kind of matters a little bit. I am not going to spend too much time. I got a couple of people when I was kind of walking around going, for essential, do you mean that it's working or not working? I was like, okay, if you have to ask that question, obviously the answer is no. So a lot of people, and this is not just a factor to here, this is a factor across kind of North America. If you look at the documentation, the training, all of the stuff that's coming out right now for Project Management Office, it's coming from across the pond in the UK. They have embraced, there's like certification levels around Project Management Offices that you could do from out there. In here, it started, it's not that it hasn't been around forever. There used to be a certification with PMI, that's how old I am, that was actually a Project Management Office certification, sort of like how the CAPM started, but then they disbanded it, and they never brought it back. It was one of those special interest group type of certification that kind of went away. The problem that has been happening with a lot of the stuff in the US and North America in terms of Project Management Office, it's not about how we start it as a need and grow it. It was mostly around, let's put in the Cadillac model with all the process and everything, and then let's adjust the environment to it. And that's what people in the US, and that's why a lot of times when you say the word PMO, people go, oh, right? And they do this kind of like, ugh, kind of shivering thing, because it's been synonymous with extra loading of processes and baggage and things that might not be necessary in some organization because they're not there yet. But if you start out with again, if you have a plan and you have a development charter for this thing, you can grow it over the years and have like some milestones. When we reach so many PMs or we have that, then you add capability and capacity to it. but then that wasn't what was being done here. It's starting to be a little bit more that way, but we're going to talk about it a little bit more. So this next slide gives you a bunch of definitions that are out there around project management offices. There's just a couple of different ones that I want to just point out a couple of things around. So PMI, a management structure that standardizes the project-related governance process, facilitates the sharing of resources, methodologies, tools, and techniques. This one here provides decision support information, right? So you start with methodology, tools, and techniques, which is kind of like some of the basic level. But then when you get into decision making, that's a little bit of a higher level, right? And then maintain standards, standardize and introduce economies of repetition, right? And that's one of the reasons why you shouldn't have 23. You should not have 23. And then we'll talk about that a little bit more. And this one here is a group internal or external to a company, all right, that sets, maintains, ensures standards for project management. They're the keepers of best practices, project status, and direction in all one spot, all right? So again, definition kind of changes, moves around depending on how you look at it. And that's where we're going to spend a little bit more time talking around structures, functions, and how does maturity fit in. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about this off of those two graphics that I put together for you in that one page. So a lot of organization, when we start out doing project management, we've got project manager, and we talked about matrix organization this morning, and functional organizations and so on. So when you start doing projects, especially if you're in a functional environment, what's going to happen, the PM is usually in that silo where the work is going. So they report to the manager. They're never called a project manager most of the time. They're a lead, a coordinator, an expediter, whatever their terminology, because the manager is the one at the top and not you, right? So as an organization starts doing more and more projects, and projects that will go across, it's when projects within the silos, okay, when you start going across the silos with your project is when the big turning point is for most organization. And then what usually will happen at that point is we want to try to get better our agreement on how are we going to do this, and how do we do this more easily so that we don't have to, okay, what form, like my favorite thing when you're trying to put a PMO together is getting them to agree on what templates for forms they're going to use. And I kid you not, I have had almost fist fights in a room when we lay out the charter document. We have 8 charter documents. Well, mine is better than yours. And mine is an IT charter. And mine is a customer service charter. It's a charter, for crying out loud. It's a 5-page piece of paper that you need to fill out. The name of the guilty will change, right? So again, so sometimes it gets very petty when you're trying to implement a PMO, and it has to do with, you know, like we're so used to doing it in our own little cocoon, but once we start doing it across the organization, and we need to think a little bit more and kind of do a little bit more tailoring. A template becomes truly a template, right? So that it's a blank, and the names of the guilty get changed, the goal, the vision, all of the stuff for the project kind of change as the project kind of gets done. So you start out in a very much of a support type of fashion in terms of a PMO, right? So you're there to support the efforts of the PMs. The PMs sometimes too, way at the beginning, will not reside in the PMOs. The PMs will still reside in their functioning, their line of work, right? Especially if you're still very like a kind of a weak matrix type of thing. As you're moving towards, and you start seeing, oh, well, you know what? We got all the templates, now it's working. we got the training, we got, a bunch of stuff going in from the PMO. The next thing that usually happens is, from a PMO perspective, we want to get a clear understanding of what do projects look like in our organization. That's the second stepping stone, is that then your PMO becomes not just a supporting PMO, but it becomes a controlling PMO. So you want to gather the statistics, you want to get the data, you want to start being involved and have more of a say in resource allocation and resources and all that kind of stuff. Also, often start you thinking of, okay, wait a second, we have limited resources. How can we bring in portfolio management in the mix? All right, and those are some of the things that start happening at a control level. When you get to directive, that's when you've assimilated all of the project management stuff under the umbrella of the PMO. So the PMO physically becomes an entity that is out there where the PM, that's where they sit. When they're not working on a project, that's where training happens, that's where coaching, mentoring, portfolio management. So the director or the head of the PMO, or however you want to call that person, because again, naming conventions, let's be clear, I have been called a partner manager, expectation manager, all right? And I was literally a PM, but I was managing the partner's expectations, right? So there's a bunch of different naming conventions that I use throughout. A project lead in one organization is not necessarily the equivalent of a project lead in another organization. So let's get the names out of the way. But when you look at what they fundamentally do, at that level, a PMO becomes a center of excellence. Everything around project management starts revolving and coming from that PMO. It is also very important to not have 2 or 3 of those. And I'm going to pick on banks for a second. And I do understand that you have client-facing and you have IT, but at the long end of it, you're doing projects that will affect everything, the clients and IT and the rest of your organization. So you need to have one location. So because then what happens when you have 2 PMOs, then it's the dual banjo arguing thing. Oh, well, this is like client-centered, so we're doing it and we're using our forms and our PMs. Or this is more IT, but there's IT in there. And then the one that has 23, this poor woman, I don't know. I don't know how they do it. So you need to really clearly think. So the problem with this is a lot of organizations, they don't start out and plan for, okay, let's start and let's see how it works. If we bring, we do the first step, right? So we'll make this, so where the training happens, where knowledge, so basically knowledge, where the knowledge is gonna sit for the project stuff in our organization. And then after that, let's make a plan to, if this is working and people get used to this, because this is a change again for a lot of organizations. If they were used to have a PM per silo doing their project, and then they all get into a fighting war when there's a project that goes across the silos as to who's going to be the PM because you got the biggest control, right? Or so you think. You've also got the biggest nightmares. Yes. Basically, but then if that knowledge then resides in one place, whoever wants that knowledge knows to go there. So that's the first thing. You want to make them so that they know where to go. And once you've gotten used to that road, the next step is to, okay, how can we improve this? So then you get the economies of size and all this stuff because you start kind of accumulating stuff all in one place. So again, starting out with, reporting templates, like functions that are fairly basic at the beginning, and then moving into stuff like audits and moving into, getting better analytics. from your project, getting to be able to do the big one. Again, I like to say that when you get into resource allocation and management, that's usually where it tips and where people start going, oh, okay. So if we have a clear view, like I remember one organization that I assisted in kind of doing this for them is they, after a couple of years, they had it running and it was working fine. And then they said, well, you know what? But the thing that we're missing is we see all these organizations with these dashboards. And I was like, okay, well, dashboard is like a reporting tool. I'm very, for those of you, and I have a person in the room who's been one of my students before, I like to say that a fool with a tool is still a fool. So, I am not very big on tools being the end-all to end-all. Like, to me, you got to have the logical thing. So when I teach at college in the same way, like, don't tell me Microsoft Project is going to, fix your life. It's not, right? You need to have the logic. So this is, again, is a logical thing. So yes, a dashboard is cute, but what do you want the dashboard for? And that's when they were saying, well, we'd like to have a clear picture in one place as to what all of our projects look like. Where are they? What, you know what? That would be very powerful. I said, well, that's basically a status reports of all of your 18 projects on one page, right? And that's where this stuff becomes powerful and that you can kind of guide it a little bit further. The problem has been that people they start thinking that this is what they need, but then they start with this model, right? Or this model, right? And then all of a sudden you have to change all the organization and you have to have portfolio management with people that are just started swimming, right? And that has been kind of like the biggest issue around these things. So again, the naming convention, right? So a little bit of a grain of salt there. The other thing to kind of look at as well, to link this into a little bit more, is when you add maturity to the whole thing, all right? So taking the top portion from our previous chart and then moved it into maturity levels. What I've done for you guys is the level name. There's different models out there, again, right? Just because we can agree to disagree of what we're naming stuff. But there's a couple of different maturity levels for project management offices. And the two that I've been kind of dealing with for years use the different namings as level 1 ad hoc or awareness. I love the term awareness. If you just need to be aware of project management, that's all you, so where's the knowledge? To me, awareness, knowledge, right? Then repeatable, consistent. That means at that level, you should be able to not kind of like a project comes up, the next thing is, okay, who's the sponsor? Who's the PM? Where's the charter? Or how can we start the charter? Is there a business case? So that's kind of the automated stuff that should happen consistently. Another thing around repeatable and consistent is the fact that we talked about, and we've seen a couple of lessons learned today, we are not utilizing and doing half what we could do with the power of lessons learned. But I'm not going to talk about it. That could be another discussion. It's another one of my pet peeves. But when you're at that level, and definitely when you're into the integrated level, you need to have that cycle that happens. A PM needs to be able to go and search and know, in my organization, in the past, I want to know how it is to deal with a set of stakeholders, for example, what projects worked before with those stakeholders, what can I get from their documentation that can help me out. Things like, from lessons learned, finding out how long does it take someone to approve stuff, right? From a stakeholder perspective. I don't know about you, that's one of the first things that I ask of my sponsor, hey, how quick are you at approving stuff? Because, when I get to you with something, I don't want it sitting there for 3 months, right? Because then you're going to see the impact on the schedule, right? So, and that's the sort of stuff that should happen. So when you move into integrated and defined, there's no questions about the processes. The processes are there. Actually, what we want to look at here is that's where we want to start doing the better reporting, the more enhanced reporting, the dashboards, the linking stuff into, all right, so this is what we have right now. This is what we have coming down the pipe. What room do we have? And resource allocation too, coordination and better resource allocation starts really happening at that level, right? Notice almost like a seesaw type of thing, almost in these models. So same thing this morning with the balance matrix, right? I always say to people, it's not balance, it's the seesaw of all seesaw, right? So most models are like that, right? Where the center point is like, oh my God, I don't know which way. So for this one here, the seesaw effect is that resource allocation, the coordination. This is where you'll have literally lots of PMs. You have probably a director of PMO, full staff in your PMO. None of these, like we get together for a meeting and we call it a PMO meeting every month type of thing. All right. When we move beyond that, this is literally a department. It's a function in your organization. And literally that's where the PMs will sit and reside, and literally based on, project comes, right? We need this skill set from our PM. Go to the pool of PM. Sylvie, you're it. And then you get dropped on the project, and here's your sponsor, and so on and so forth. That's in the, I'm painting a very nice picture. It's in the best of functioning PMO worlds, all right? But that's what kind of should be happening. When you get to level 5, this is where the director of the PMO at that point has a seat with the board of directors, and when there's decisions around projects in the organization, that's when they also have a say. So the portfolio management concept is fully engaged at that point. They are center of excellence, sorry, my French just came out there for a second. But literally, this is where we look at the organization and how can we make it better? How can we improve? It's not just trying to catch up with how can we do it. It's how can we improve it? How can we make it better? How can we sustain it? All right. Some organizations that probably would need some of these and are very project oriented are consulting organizations, right? But sometimes they're so contract oriented that they don't look sometimes at having the PMO per se. So you have sometimes a break in there. But that's kind of like putting in the maturity level. At that point too, when you're at that optimized kind of stage, you're looking at decisions and forethought around projects. So strategic planning, like you're at the table with the rest of the people, and things are not just, oh, by the way, we have this project. We had like time or money to kill this year. Let's plug in something. No, there's a conscious thought process around how we put in and how we bring in projects into that environment. So in that sheet of yours, I've put kind of those two in there so that you can kind of see the progression and how it kind of works its way out. All right, gotta love my little saying once in a while. First, you should have actually I put the word should in there, but have a definite, clear, practical idea, a goal, an objective. Second, you need to have the necessary means to achieve your ends, wisdom, money, materials, and methods. And then third, you need to adjust your means to the end. So, again, I am very not a big proponent of cookie cutter models. Every organization is a different being. As much as we're all different human beings in this room, unless do I have a set of twins? I always like that when there's like two people that go, no, we're not really different, we're twins. So even at that, you have differences, all right? But organizations are entities and they will be different. So me going into an organization and say, from A to Z, here's how we're going to build you a PMO, and it's going to work. Well, it might work for that organization, but then if I try to do something the same way in another one, it will not work. So the gist of this is that you need to really have a clear, you can't just wake up, and I've had a client do this, and it was mesmerizing to see. Literally, the CEO came up and went to Project World or something one year. Oh yeah, it's bad when you get the CEOs to attend Project World. As they come back and they go, oh, we can do this. So yes, the CEO apparently came in and said, you know what, I went to Project World and there's this thing I call portfolio management, and they show me all the projects that are going on, and they take care of making sure that the resources are balanced and the budget, and then they have this project management office that runs it all. I want one of those. And then literally it was like, I want one of those like tomorrow, right? So he sent out all of these poor little people like scurrying like mouths going, oh God, what do we do now, right? To try to figure out what the best PMO was. And then guess what? They came out, well, he wants one. He's going to be willing to spend money. So they went and they put the Cadillac model in. Within less than 2 years, that PMO was like, oh, that was the worst thought process that ever happened. CEO was gone, thank goodness, but it wasn't working for them because you need, this is like anything, right? You need to plan it. You need to consciously map it out. You'll see more and more coming out of the UK, the concept of having a chartering process for your PMO, where you charter, okay, this is where we want it to be, and this is the goal, the visions, why we need it for, right? And then once you've met that, and you give it like a year or two to function and to get intertwined into the tissue of your organization, because that's the other thing. You need to, this is a change for people. And if they were used to, one of the first PMOs I ever worked in, I was used to being the PMO. Like people had a question about something, oh, let's go to Sylvie. She's got a form, she's got a template, she's got something. She's going to tell us. So I was the PMO, and then they put in the PMO, and I had to kind of find a way of getting all this information out of my hard drive, out of my brain, and make it so that it was kind of accessible to all of the people. And people was, oh, it's not the same as asking Sylvie. Right? And then they didn't like it. And some of the processes weren't really refined, right? So it won't change your organization. If your organization does not have a team memory for different things and they don't know how to go about having the processes and following the processes, putting a PMO is not going to make that they're going to start following processes, right? So you need to start out small in a lot of cases and kind of build your way around it. So a couple of things around do's and don'ts around implementation. So implementation, or like I said before, rehabilitation. So if you think that you have a PMO, and there was a couple of people that said, yeah, we do have one, but I'm not quite sure if I would call it essential. So if you do have one and it is working or not quite working, or they might be just like a ship in the night with no guidance, right? Expected to do everything and anything. That's happens sometimes. A couple of do's and don'ts. So again, my favorite saying is that when we walk in a room as PMs, we have the word change tattooed across our forehead and people see us coming. This is the same thing for a PMO. When you are going to implement this, especially if you're still in a quite fairly functional environment, they know what that means. And there used to be a time, I could say literally about 20 years ago, that people were really more used to operational work, and project work was the back thing that you did if you had time. Not anymore. Every organization actually works, and their fuel is now projects and projects and projects and projects. So this is a little bit different, but still the impact of changing how you're doing it, where you get your information, where you report stuff in, is kind of, it's enough to kind of traumatize some people. So you need to kind of get them used to the idea. And the thing is too, there is a saying that says knowledge is power. Knowledge is only power when you share it with someone else. It's not power if you keep it to yourself. And there are still a lot of people that believe that if they have the knowledge, they're safe, they're secure, there's nothing that can really happen. So the sharing of, and the openness of the lessons learned process and all that kind of stuff doesn't really happen really kind of quickly in those environments. And that's also part of cultural aspects, right? So you need to kind of work on that. I have a plan now, but a plan on, okay, what does it need to look now? And how do we want it to grow, right? And again, be a little bit flexible. Let's not say like in 5 years from now, we're gonna have a center of excellence. That might change. So you need to reevaluate that plan. So start with a basic one. Make sure that basic one functions for a period of time. And like I said, if you like put a little breadcrumbs and people follow the breadcrumbs and go to it, consistently, even when you don't put breadcrumbs anymore, that's how you know that you've successfully done that first one, right? After that, yes. So what's our next step? And then the next step needs to be guided by literally the buy-in from your executive support, right? So what do they want to get? You need to show them, it's like a value thing. I'm starting to be really tired of proving my value to everybody, but I'm used to it by now. So what I often ask, so what do you want from this? And then what you do is you create that list of the things that they want, you map it out, and then you agree with everybody in a democratic manner, okay? So if we were to augment this by adding these, those are top 5 or 10 things that we want to hit. And you do it incrementally and give them a chance to, does it work? You'll see when you start playing with reporting, there's a funny thing that happens where people have to start being very honest of what green, yellow, and red is. Okay? And that is often, like, it's very different when they have to show it, right? As opposed to go into a meeting and say, hey, yeah, we're all fine, right? So, and then, because, showing even if the little dashboard traffic light saying, I'm a yellow or I'm a red, some people have never gone there, and it's not because their projects haven't gone there, right? So you need to be really kind of remembering that. So the reporting is going to be another one of like little speed bumps where you're going to have to slow down and kind of, again, this is not to nail you to the corner and to crucify you if your project isn't going well. My thought process around projects going well is that the entire organization is making that project not go well, and not just the PM. So the PM should not be like traumatized by a traffic light. They should be able to explain the traffic light, all right? And you'll see that happening. So that's kind of another little bump in the road. And again, you need to get people's buy-in. The way to foster that is to show them that this is not what did you call your project office, sorry?
Shutdown.
A shutdown? Yeah, they don't need to shut down. They're not terminated, right? This is not a shutdown of them, right? So you need to actually, yes, get them to understand that, you know what, if we all know, we can do things, right? We can look at improving. We can look, maybe it's a question of resources aren't balanced properly, or we've got too many things on the table, and that often happens too. When you start kind of putting the portfolio management stuff in there, that's another thing. People start going, oh my God, we're getting our people to do how many projects this year, right? And then after that, they wonder why people are like headless chickens around the office. And then the burnout rate has kind of gone that way, right? So yes, so it puts things visually out there, so be prepared for that kind of whoa, okay, happening. And it'll happen to you at different levels. It'll happen to you from a PM's perspective, it'll happen to you from the executive, and it'll happen to you too the first time that somebody says no to someone having a pet project wanting to put them in the queue without having to go through the queue to do it. Again, people expect, we are a bunch of very need to be gratified instantly people. I look at, my daughters, I look at the younger generation out there, and if that's why by the way, if you didn't know, the average time that people spend in an organization used to be 26 months. Now it's down to 18. And that's our Generation X, thank you, because they don't get something, or they don't get training, or and they move, right? So we can't expect that kind of, we're gonna see the results right away. And that you need to communicate well, especially to the top people at the top, right? I am all for agile, I'm all for a bunch of different things that get us to a product faster and sooner, but in the case of this, you need to kind of let it stew a little bit, so it takes the mix of stuff and adjusts to it. That CEO that wanted the PMO like the next day, there must be some software for that. Yep, he said it. Yes, let's go and get some enterprise project management software, and we have an instant PMO in a box. Does not work like that. So it's not like installing software. It's not even like doing incremental installation of software. You really need to think of the structure, the functions, all of that kind of stuff, and how you're going to develop it. Executive buy-in support, like most of the stuff that we do, if that isn't there, you're just literally just going like this, like give me a cement wall, right? It's not going to go, right? More control and audit. Audit is a very underestimated tool in terms of improvement in an organization. And most people think that they need to go and hire like a consultant. I can do this for you. But most people think that they can hire a consultant and just kind of have like an audit and then it'll fix stuff. If you do have a PMO, one of the benefits of the PMO is you can literally have your people audit different other people. That gives a growth and a training aspect to your other PMs, right? And it also helps you kind of do process improvement more regularly and frequently on little things. So instead of waiting that you hear customer complaint or people complain that this isn't working or that isn't working, you can just kind of like get the information faster and implement it a little bit faster. The other one is, it's a trendy thing, all right? So they've got a PMO, why can't we get a PMO? That was another thing that CEO, I was there and I had like 4 buddies with me and their organizations all have a PMO. Why can't I get one? All right, so again, it's not a little tinky dinker toy that you just get at Christmas and get bored with or play with the box. Have you had any kids that played with the box more than played with the toy? So you really need to, again, be conscious of what you're doing when you're implementing this. It's not a one-day thing, and it's not a instantaneous, and it's definitely not something, we should have one because everybody else has one. It needs to be conscious in an organization. And then don't be too ambitious. Again, don't skip, like hopefully I've given you this kind of function maturity stuff that if somebody comes to you tomorrow and say, I want a PMO, you can go to them and say, hey, yeah, you know what? Yeah, okay. We're going to start with this. What do you think of this? And we're going to make it work. And we're first, one of the biggest part of implementing, and I'm not kidding, I was joking before, but I am not kidding, is getting people that have the same form 28 times in an organization to agree to the 1 or the 2 or maybe the 3, right? Because a charter, for example, you could have a charter for a very simple project, or you could have a charter for a more complex project. right? Neither of those two should be 50 pages, by the way, right? But you can have a couple of different kind of forms to different complexity or different tailoring of projects, but you should never have 28, or you should never leave it open. That's kind of one of the first things that you do. You want to establish some, because if you want to start collecting those analytics, you need to have the same point of reference. So orange and apples, they're nice fruits, but they don't, match well together. So you need to have oranges to oranges, and that's kind of one of the places that you start. You start kind of putting the stuff that's kind of the templates and the processes, and you figure out what methodologies that you're going to use. That's another thing too. People are saying you can't have a PMO and have agile practices. That's not true. I've seen organizations that have PMOs and they do agile, they do waterfall, they do a bunch of different methodology. How you control and how you govern, and then how you decide on how you're tailoring that methodology for what application in your organization, that's the PMO. All right? Don't be too complex. Yeah, one of the big things people will kind of want, okay, well, is that a menu? And I pick, I want the bigger one. I want to show my PMO to the world. It needs to be like big and have lots of tools and lots of stuff. So yeah, you need to kind of slow yourself down with that one. So the other side of that sheet that I gave you originally to ask those 3 questions is literally, you know what? If you were to go back to your office and you had any say in this, okay? What are some of the things that you would want to go back to your PMO and maybe kind of look at or investigate, or kind of a little bit of a step forward for yourself, and how you want to kind of maybe do reflection? If you do have a say in some of that stuff and it kind of resonated with you today, by all means, use the stuff, and you can also kind of talk to me if you want to hear a little bit more from the trenches. But it's not that it's that complicated. You do need to get everybody on the same page, looking at it the same way, and it can't be already thinking on how we're going to fly a plane when we're trying to start with a bicycle. And that's kind of the big thing. Kind of start with a bicycle that works, and then once the bicycle works and you're not falling off every speed bump that you get, then move into maybe a motorcycle or a car, and then kind of keep on going that way. And that's kind of basically it.
You have about 2.5 minutes for questions.
Look at me go. All right. Yes?
I think my question will be give me some suggestion to get these buy-ins from the upper management where I can completely say have maybe 0 to 1 knowledge of project management.
Okay. So with executives at the top of the food chain, what you need to do is you need to, and again, I'm going to say it, you need to show how are they going to get value from this, right? So a lot of the time, a business case around this is showing how over time, how you can have economies, I can't say that word today, economies of scale, how you can have that pool of PM, which makes you more flexible, right, over time to do certain things. And then the resource utilization gets better, and the reporting. And those they see as really great value. And then when you introduce portfolio management to the mix, then that allows them to really better distribute the money, the resources, everything around it. And that they also see extreme value. But again, you need to start small, build people around understanding how you utilize it. And at that small start, it is a tool. Literally, it's not a department, it is a tool. And as you build it in, it becomes a department, it becomes a function in the organization. And that's where your biggest value will turn around.
Sylvia?
Yeah.
Sylvia, great presentation.
Yeah.
A question for you. What's the, in your opinion, optimal ratio of PMO staff members to the servicing organization? You have a recipe for success?
I don't really have a recipe, but I can tell you that from a PM's perspective, it's never enough. So again, it will very much depend on your organization, right? And when you start going into the analytics, there are some analysis around that actually that is available if you want to dig for it. But basically, around the time where you start incorporating full control, you need to have staff at the PMO level that could do some of that stuff, because the intent then is some of that stuff is taken away from the PM, and then it's a coordinator or someone that actually looks after that thing at the PMO level and then consolidates it for the PMO as well. So when you start doing that, you need to have a little bit more body count. When you start out, I was just very happy to have that one person kind of sitting there that actually, like if I was in a crunch as a PM, I could literally say, could you pull that report out, or could you do something for me when the PMO started out? But after it develops, PMs are going to become much more used to having that like admin function there to assist them. It's not a bad thing, but I don't have like a 1-to-4, I don't have any ratio that I can kind of give you. It will very much depend on your organization. And I am done, apparently.